Thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us in our inaugural Zoom member digital forum. I mean, that we live in a new world. My name is Tim Phelps and I'm the Executive Director for TMAC, and I will be your host throughout this presentation. Our first speaker today is Representative Tim Hennessey. Representative Hennessey is a lifelong resident of Chester County, and the representative has been representing the residents of the 26th district since 1993. Today, he serves as the chairman of the House Transportation Committee. Following Representative Hennessey will be Representative Martina White of the 170th district in Philadelphia. She was elected to her second full term in 2018. Martina is a financial advisor and a lifelong resident of Northeast Philadelphia. Representative White led the 2019 Transportation Infrastructure Task Force, which established several of the recommendations that we will be talking about. I do not know if he has joined us yet or not. His schedule was in flux, but I also did invite Representative John Lawrence to join with us. Representative Lawrence also sits on the Transportation Committee, and he was a member of the task force. And our final presenter will be Jason Wagner. Jason is the Director of Policy and Government Relations for the Associated Pennsylvania Contractors. Jason works very closely with the Keystone Funding Coalition. So upon Jason's closing remarks, I will present our panel with questions that you have submitted. So please keep them coming as we go through the presentation. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. And Representative Hennessey, the floor is all yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Tim, for putting this together and this Zoom meeting together. And thanks to TMAC for your help and advice over the course of years. You give us direction, and I think your suggestions add to the gravitas of some of the ideas when they start to take shape in Harrisburg too. Thank all your members. I thank all your members. And by the way, I think in addition, I think I saw Representative Schusterman who's on the call. Did you? I don't know if there are any other Chester County legislators that are on. But anyway, I'm pleased to join you today. And the thought occurred to me as I was thinking what to say here, that had you scheduled this meeting 6 weeks ago or so, it would have been a totally different conversation that we'd be having. Back then in early March, our economy was pretty much humming along very smoothly. And it looked like an easy budget season that faced us. And frankly, we would have welcomed that this spring and summer and fall. We could have focused on the general election coming up in November. But of course, the virus changed all that. It changed our daily lives, but it changed life in the legislature quite a bit. I'm sure it's changed life for all of you, everybody listening in. More importantly, it changed life in transit arena. Excuse me. In the day-to-day workings at PennDOT, and it's affected SEPTA substantially. Almost, well, even harder than substantially, and it's just untracked a lot of PennDOT projects that were in the pipeline. Hopefully some of those we've gotten back on track. Let me take a moment to welcome Martina White if she's on, and Representative John Lawrence is, I think, going to join us. And as I said, Representative Schusterman, I don't know if there are any other legislators that have joined us, but I invite them if they want to chime in as we talk or as I talk. Because I don't want this to be a lecture. I don't want to monopolize the conversation. But I think that there are questions that Tim is collecting, and we'll be asked to address those specific items toward the end of our presentation here. Let me just give you an idea of the political landscape in Harrisburg these days. And I want to start by emphasizing and correcting some comments that I've heard that we're getting more and more like Washington, D.C. I can't imagine what Washington, D.C. is like to be as partisan as all that. I don't see that we are that partisan in Chester County, I'm sorry, in Harrisburg. we try not to be, and we try to work together in delegations throughout for different parts of the state, but also in Harrisburg. Generally, we can get along and get things done. But there's this COVID virus has caused us to move to some extent more in the direction of Washington, D.C. That there have been more votes that have been split along party lines than normal. For example, Senate Bill 327 we dealt with the week before Easter. It basically instructed the state departments, the department heads in all of the in transportation, in health and human services, health, aging. Everybody was supposed to look at their budgets to see whether or not there were any kind of debt load that they were carrying that might be refinanced during this time of low interest rates. It set up an advisory commission to guide the governor on the decisions that he's making with regard to this virus crisis. It didn't challenge his authority to make the decisions, but what it said was that after you make the decisions, tell the legislature, the House and the Senate, within the day, so that we would, we weren't getting our news from the newspapers or the radio reports the next day. We would actually have some advice from the governor as to what his decision was. We didn't challenge his authority to make it, just said, let us know. And as I said, it's just a little embarrassing at times to find out what's going on in Harrisburg by hearing about it on KYW or reading about it in the headline in the newspaper. All the Republicans voted for it, all the Democrats voted against it. I asked one of my Democratic friends why, and he said, well, you guys stacked the advisory committee against the governor. You're trying to hurt the governor. And going back and looked at it, because I didn't think it was that way at all. There were 10 Republican appointees and 6 Democratic appointees. That sounds like it is stacked, but then the governor had 4 additional appointees to the commission, which basically brought it 10-10, and then 3 by the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. It seemed pretty even from my point of view, but they, and to some extent with the Democratic majority in the Supreme Court, you might even argue that that was slightly tilted toward the Democrats. But it was presented apparently in the Democratic caucus that we were stacking the commission against the governor, and everybody voted against it. The good news is, even though it was passed and went to the Senate, the governor, he didn't like it, but he did follow some of the instructions. Within the next week, he instructed all the state agencies to look for a way to save money, and that's good for the taxpayers. It was part of the bill that they didn't like, but the fact is, he took the admonition and made it work. He appointed his own advisory committee, and which is good because, frankly, we'd like to have some way of finding out who's making the decisions in Harrisburg these days. It just seems like some of the decisions that are coming out are, indefensible to some extent and lack any kind of cogent rationale or reasoning. And for that reason, we wanted to, to get some clarity, some structure to the decision-making process. The governor is also moving toward, as you've heard, he's moving toward, as you heard on the news, he's moving toward, a phased reopening of some businesses in Pennsylvania, or all business in Pennsylvania. Frankly, this concept of a life-sustaining business has been a confusing one for everybody to try to figure out. But he's moving in that direction. So to some extent, I think the governor wants to lead. I think that the legislature is pushing him in a direction, pointing a direction out to him, and he seems to be following it, even though he's not doing it pursuant to a legislative demand. He's seeming to pick up the ideas. We did the same thing in Senate Bill 613. We basically passed a bill to say, let's use what are called the CISA guidelines developed by the Department of Homeland Security in DC. They were meant to be advisory, but at least they were structured and detailed. And so in Senate Bill 613, we said, let's Pennsylvania use those as a mandate. because this concept of a life-sustaining business has been very difficult for all of us to get our arms around. I think we all understand grocery stores and medical centers and pharmacies, but then you end up opening up Walmart or the tractor service centers, TSC, or Lowe's, and you got to wonder how they are necessarily life-sustaining. But frankly, in a flexible, by a flexible definition, they can be. You need plumbing supplies sometimes. If you have a leak, you can't sit around and rely on duct tape forever. So you need to be able to get these kind of supplies. From my point of view, as long as people try to be careful in terms of how they interact with each other, we ought to have more businesses open, because we need jobs for people to come back to, and we can't have jobs if we don't have businesses that are financially solvent in order to make that happen and provide those jobs. And part of the debate in the last couple of weeks in the legislature, excuse me, has been, whether or not we care more about business than we care about human life. Frankly, human life without jobs is probably going to be very difficult for all of us as we go forward. So we need to do both. We can do both, and we just have to set our mind to doing that. Construction was a problem when the first life-sustaining list came out. It halted all construction in Pennsylvania, and I don't know how some of the other legislators have dealt with it. I got a call, I remember early on, from somebody whose roofer walked away with like 80% of the roof redone, but roofer refused to finish the other part of the roof because he said he didn't want to have his people arrested, or he didn't want to get himself in trouble with the police. It took about 2 days to get an answer from the administration, and when they then issued a revised list, they put in some exceptions for emergencies. Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying they did that because of my call, but probably they probably had 50 calls like that, saying from different legislators saying this doesn't make sense. You have to ease up some of the pressure on this, the total ban. And they did. They are trying. Everybody's doing the best they can in dealing with a novel situation, but frankly, they've made some mistakes just trying to figure out ways to ease up the burden on businesses across the state. What's an emergency? Like I said, is the emergency when you don't have your roof finished? Is it an emergency today, or is it if it's not going to rain for 5 days or 6 days, or is it an emergency just to get it done? From my point of view, just getting it done makes sense. And we finally, like I said, it took a couple of days. We got that approval from the administration, and I appreciated that. Like I said, if anybody else has some interesting stories, they can jump in. I'll tell you what I had done. Frankly, I started just saying if this particular business has gotten a waiver and can be allowed to operate, then I was giving people emails for myself. We didn't have anybody to type out letters, but I could type it out myself on email and send these things out. Just saying, if this guy got approval from the administration or whatever board DCED was using to process these waiver requests, if this particular business, I'll use a kitchen cabinet business as an example, if they can get approval, then if my kitchen cabinet maker should be allowed to operate as well. So I would send emails to them and say, put this in your pocket. If the police come, tell them to give me a call, and I'll explain why I've given you this authorization. I don't know whether anybody else in the legislators in the panel have done that up to this date, but that's just the way I was doing it, because I couldn't let people just operate or not operate, be afraid to operate in terms of keeping their business running when we couldn't get any real prompt answers out of the administration. Early on, we had questions about golf courses. Finally, the government, the administration said all golf courses have to close for players to play golf, but groundskeepers rather, could be allowed to be at the golf course every day. They were allowed to work the the golfers were not allowed to play on the course. Landscapers were allowed to work and they were allowed to be open, but the garden centers, DCED was telling us the garden centers had to stay shut. Now, where do landscapers get the mulch and stuff to fix up people's yards and the areas around buildings? Well, they went to the big box stores, the TSCs, the Walmarts, the Home Depot, the Lowe's, and bought in bulk. And yet we were strangling our garden stores, centers. Now, I understand they are either have been recently allowed to open or are soon to be allowed to open. But the problem has been it's been hard to get answers from the administration. They're overwhelmed. I don't think anybody anticipated this thing coming down the pipeline as it has, but it certainly has been very difficult for everybody, for business owners, for people who want to work and support their families. They're trying to figure out this whole process, and it really hasn't been very clear to this point. We've been through these bills that I mentioned earlier. We're trying to force some sort of structure and organization on the administration, and they seem to be listening, which is a good thing. The recent order that went into effect today's Friday, this past Monday, everybody has to wear masks. I can live with that. I think it makes sense given the situation we're in. But I know I've not been at the grocery store. My wife has been there. Other people have told me that the lines are exceptionally long in the grocery stores. And then we got the order this Monday that every other cash register had to close in order to get 6 feet of separation between the checkout lines. That makes initial sense until you think about it, and what it does by closing off every other register, you double the waiting time for people to be in the line, and the CDC guidelines indicate the longer you're in a line, the more problems you have in terms of spreading the virus. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in that regard. Closing the liquor stores, frankly, from my point of view, hey, I'm Irish. I tend to drink some. I just thought it was, sort of an overreach by the government to close all the liquor stores. Frankly, I can't think of the last time I saw a crowd in the liquor store, except maybe the day before Thanksgiving and the day before New Year's Eve. Most of the time, if I'm in the store, there might be 2 or 3 other people in the store. Where generally the customers are outnumbered by the clerks. But in a one fell swoop back on March 16th, everybody, all the state stores were closed. There's now the administration is moving to open some of them up, and perhaps next week we'll open more of them to the curbside service. But it's been a very difficult month for some people, and we don't like to hear in Chester County, where I have my district and where we're located. TMAC is located. It's easy to go to Delaware or Maryland to buy liquor. At least it had been until the governor, John Carney, down in Delaware, said he was not going to allow Pennsylvania license plates to stop at liquor stores. Be that as it may, I think, with the movement in the legislature to pass certain bills, to open up certain bills, I think he's opening up. And one of the things I'm hearing is, well, I think we all know that state stores have opened up a limited number of stores for curbside service. Thank goodness. The rumor is that all of them will be doing curbside service fairly soon. Personally, I think we all have stories about how we've reacted to individual problems. When the governor closed everything on March 16th, there was an announcement made that the turnpike and the rest areas that were handled by PennDOT on highways which were not the turnpike were going to close, which made no sense at all from my point of view. It seemed to me that people in the traveling public needed restrooms. They needed places to get something to eat. I shot an email to the turnpike and the head of Mark Compton, who has been before this the TMAC board before, I think back sometime maybe a year ago, maybe not quite that long, talking about the situation that he runs in the turnpike. he gave me a call back and we talked about it. And to his credit, within 2 days, he managed to rescind the closing of the rest areas on the turnpike. But you know, I'm still waiting for some response from PennDOT formally. It took Mark 2 days to get it done. It took PennDOT about 3 weeks to get it done, to open up all of their, they have 33 rest areas. The turnpike has 17. But my point is that talking it out sometimes solves problems. And, you know, Mark was able to take the bull by the horns and make some executive decisions. And I think it was good for the traveling public that he actually took on that burden and made the decision and ordered everybody. We now have the inside restrooms for everybody. The turnpike rest areas have restaurants. Most have 4, some have 5, I think, where people could get hot food. Those have been closed. They opened at least one of those restaurants in each of the 17 turnpike rest areas, sometimes 2. They took all the chairs and tables out, but they put they made arrangements for the restaurants to be open so people could get hot food, even to take out, eat in their cars. But it was hot food that they could have, and they can also have the comfort of hot running water in the restrooms instead of the porta potties that they brought in initially. PennDOT has followed his lead, but it took, I think, 3 weeks for PennDOT to open up all of its rest areas for inside bathrooms. Locally, when it happened, the one thing I noticed was the traffic diminished so much. I think people in Pennsylvania were actually listening to the governor and the government. They were staying off the roads. I remember, you know, sitting outside Suburbia Shopping Center. I bought dinner to take home because we wanted to keep the restaurant in business there at Suburbia. And I sat for like 75 seconds for one whole cycle of the traffic light. And where you would normally see 70, 80, 90 cars pass through that intersection, I saw 3. There was a tractor trailer and 2 automobiles in that whole 75-second span. And I thought to myself, what a great time for PennDOT to get out and fix the roads. So I spoke with Bob Kennedy, who's our maintenance manager in Chester County, and also talked to Ken McLean from District 6 in King of Prussia to get the pothole crews out. Now they basically were sending 2/3 of their workforce home each week and bringing in 1/3. As a result, you know, we talked it out and we convinced them that they were then bringing in the people and sending them out in different directions. First to do bridge inspections, excuse me, other highway inspections, and to do potholes. Now they put them all on pothole duty, and hopefully you're seeing the improvement in the roads and the potholes that we had. We had a relatively mild season this winter, so the potholes weren't as bad as they had been in years past, but they should be all being fixed at this point with the crews that are working but managing to follow the CDC guidelines. And I mention that just because I think it's pressure from legislators, pressure from the legislature that have caused PennDOT to restart some of its construction projects. I hear about that mainly from KYW News Radio when they talk about the delays on some of the highways because the construction is up and running again after it had been shut down initially for a number of weeks. And it's, like I said, it's frustrating from my point of view to get news from radio and newspapers as opposed to getting it directly from some official sources in Harrisburg.
Excuse me, Representative. Excuse me, Representative. I know that we do have Martina White that's on the call.
Okay.
And she does have she wants to talk about the
Right.
and move to the bills.
Yeah, I was just about to wrap up anyway. I said the hopeful news is we're getting back on track. And the initial shutdown was probably overly broad, but now we've brought back a number of projects that we're phasing them in already. The governor in his recent announcement, I think on Monday, said he was going to phase more in. And to give Pennsylvania credit and give the governor credit, we have fewer cases in Pennsylvania than we have in New Jersey and in New York State and even New York City. So to some extent, the drastic shutdown has worked. It has cost us a lot in other areas of our business, but it has kept our numbers down. So I want to give the governor credit for that part of the decision, but I think a lot of it is just has been overly broad. You know, we won't make these same mistakes the next time we deal with this kind of a crisis. So with that, I will make way for Martina to talk about the task force bills that we've generated as, you know, as part of the Transportation Committee. She did a wonderful job last summer, throughout the summer, just holding meetings, a lot of telephone meetings and meetings in Harrisburg when we were able to be there, just to put this package together. And I think it will bode well for Pennsylvania as we go forward with a number of ideas to get the economy and the transportation sector of the economy back on track. So with that, I'll yield to Martina, and I'll await some questions later on.
Thank you, Representative Martina. You have the floor in about 18 minutes.
All right, great. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you, Chairman, for all of your efforts in helping to ensure the transportation infrastructure investment takes place in Pennsylvania. What I'm going to do is just kind of run through some of these slides with you guys. You know, first and foremost, I think everyone has become abundantly clear that we have had a funding crisis when it comes to infrastructure investment in Pennsylvania prior to coronavirus, and we still have one today, and it's likely to only get worse given the circumstances. I mean, some of the things you should be aware of if you aren't already is the consistent underfunding is definitely an issue. Reduced state and federal contributions by 2022 to 2023. Reason for mentioning that is because the Federal Highway Trust Fund is basically going to be insolvent by 2023. Pennsylvania Turnpike has been debt financing payments of $450 million to PennDOT each year, and these are going to be discontinued in July of 2022. So, you know, our budget is going to be severely impacted with the economic outlook from the coronavirus. These problems still exist regardless, and they still need to be addressed. The gas tax revenues, you know, they've in past years fallen short of the projections from when the first act had gone into place a few years back. And I suspect that given the recent drop in oil prices, it's just going to cause this gap to grow. With the debt and the excessive toll hikes, the Turnpike has actually had 11 straight years of toll increases. The Turnpike still has 13 plus million in debt, and you know, they haven't been able to do any of their newer projects. They've been stuck having to just you know, handle the current projects on their list. So their budget for those types of projects are down 13%. There's also just costly delays, just in general, when it comes to the cost of congestion, aging infrastructure. So, you know, these are all things that I know sound like doom and gloom, but these are our reality. And we took the time as a task force to put together the recommendations that you can find the task force report on repwhite.com, and just go look under resources tab to find the various infrastructure task force report, as well as a summary of the bills. But I'm just going to kind of take you through it here. If you, you know, when you look at where the money's going, we basically just have to end the diversions away that have been taken away from transportation infrastructure investment, and that includes the relieving the Turnpike of these debt obligations that we kind of locked them into, and then also addressing the state police funding. Right now, we've been basically kind of, I don't want to say robbing Peter to pay Paul, but basically taking money out of transportation funding and putting it over into helping to fund the state police. And this has been going on for many, many years. The legislature did put a cap on it and has attempted to reduce that attempted to reduce that type of a transfer. But ultimately, the general fund really does need to take responsibility for paying for the state police. Improving efficiency and competition. Look, the opportunity is definitely there for us to take advantage of making sure that our taxpayer dollars are being efficiently utilized across the Commonwealth. We suggest expanding the P3 partnership opportunities. We saw it was very well received as it pertained to the rapid bridge replacement projects. And we think that that should be further utilized for various other projects. Consolidated permitting, making your guys' lives a little bit easier, and also increasing competition amongst the marketplace to reduce costs. The third recommendation was really just to localize. And I'm just going to kind of go straight into the pieces of legislation. I think that's primarily what my role is on this call. So again, I know I just briefly touched upon what the recommendations were out of the task force report, but when it comes to these particular bills, there's basically about 10 pieces of legislation here. And I can't express to you how much we are so grateful for Chairman Hennessey and his dedication to not only be willing to run these bills through his committee, but also to just help put all of this together with us as a task force. HB 2060 really just accelerates the Turnpike debt relief so that instead of these $450 million kind of hitting all at once in July of 2022, it would happen gradually over the period of the next 3 years, including this year. So, this is very important to get done, but also is going to be extremely challenging given the financial circumstances of the Commonwealth. House Bill 2061 is really just to end the diversions from the motor license fund that the Pennsylvania State Police has been receiving and using as their operating budget. So this bill would actually do that. So the funds are currently being rolled back gradually to $500 million cap by 2028 through an amendment to the state's fiscal code. But this legislation actually doubles the rate of the transfer from 4% to 8% per year, which allows the motor license fund to be restored faster and more infrastructure projects to be funded. House Bill 2062. It basically allows us to do a study of asphalt versus concrete vendors and the types of projects that they would be inclined to be working on. This way, when we create more competition between these two types of providers, we hope to bring down the costs for the overall Commonwealth. So reducing material costs, we believe is possible through more competition, but we also understand that there has to be certain metrics to evaluate the performance and the performance of the road projects. The design build is also a measure for the Commonwealth to reduce costs, and that's House Bill 2063. So this basically authorizes PennDOT to increase its use of design build as a construction project delivery system. So I know that there are some folks who are concerned about this type of proposal and concerns about the smaller types of contractors from being able to participate. But what we've done is we've limited this type of projects to much larger, over like 100 million in terms of the project size. And then county infrastructure banks, House Bill 2064, is really just an opportunity for local municipalities, or in this case, counties, to maximize and leverage their own taxpayer dollars to offer better loan terms to local governments. And so, in other words, a lot of times these counties out in middle of Pennsylvania, probably, they tend not to have the resources available to them for larger projects in their area, or even sometimes small projects. But if they team up with other towns in the same county, they might be able to go and get a loan from the county infrastructure bank to maximize the project and those dollars, and get the projects done, actually, instead of just delaying and trying to receive the monies through their own tax dollars. Okay, and then we have House Bill 2065, expand public-private partnership opportunities. This is actually something that I know we are planning to run out of committee this coming week. And it's going to be amended so that it includes municipalities so that they can conduct public-private partnerships for themselves too. And so right now we are, really excited about that. And I know they are too, because I guess they, they're telling us that it's something that they really want to be able to do. So that should create opportunities for more transportation infrastructure projects as well. House Bill 2066. So what we noticed in the past, we've seen that the revenues that come from ticketing, the ticket revenues are currently allocated to some interesting places, including to provide civil attorneys for civil court cases paid for with taxpayer dollars. Highly unusual, and that's just a small example that can generate $30 million for that could actually go towards paying for potentially the state police. And that's what this ticket revenue bill would do, is to make sure that those dollars aren't being used for things that are typically not done, and put it towards something that's very helpful and that actually needs the revenue. House Bill 2067. This is my bill, and basically what it does is there's a new casino down in South Philadelphia, and we would be allocating the revenue that's generated from that towards mass transit in the city, in Philadelphia, in order to help pay for capital projects. The House Bill 2068, the county referenda to get transportation funding. I think it's pretty clear. Basically, local municipalities, they've been asking for the means to generate their own revenues in order to pay for their own projects. They need more options on the table, and this would provide that to them so that they can use other local options. So they could do sales tax, earned income tax, or local realty transfer tax to generate revenues. We wanted to try to keep that to any local county that hadn't been implementing the current $5 additional vehicle registration fee. So in other words, if you're not already utilizing the tools that we've already given you, then why would we allow you to do this type of activity? And then finally, House Bill 2069 is consolidated permitting for highway and large projects. This legislation basically allows for, again, consolidated permitting for a series of large projects. We can improve efficiencies this way, and we can also repair, hundreds, if not thousands, of roads and bridges, and improve project developments. Other than that, I would say, as you go on to the next slide, these bills are very important. I think all of you recognize that. They're important whether we have coronavirus or not. And I don't think coronavirus is going anywhere, but our transportation infrastructure is also here to stay. So we need to make sure that these bills continue to be a priority. I know that you know, we just basically have to still get these things done, regardless of the economic outlook, because in order for our economy to actually get the kickstart that we know it needs, you can look at almost any study about transportation infrastructure, and the investment is well worth it. For every dollar that you spend on transportation infrastructure, you can get a minimum of $1 back, so you get your money back, or you can get upwards of $3 of return. And yes, the Commonwealth's going to have a budget shortfall. Probably, I'm on the Appropriations Committee in Harrisburg, and it's abundantly clear that we're potentially facing a $4 billion to a $6 billion shortfall, and it's definitely going to be challenging. The feds are, you know, have decided to send us some money, but the reality is they're not using it for revenue shortfalls. They're telling us that we can use it for, you know, all of the things that we spent on the coronavirus. That's certainly going to leave us in quite the bind. The president, though, excuse me. So the president, I'm sure you've all heard, he did recognize the need and the opportunity to invest in our economy and our infrastructure. He actually asked Congress for $2 trillion to dedicate towards this. But, you know, what I heard from Pat Toomey actually a few weeks back, he did a call to local legislators, and I actually asked the question, I said, you know, are you guys planning to do an infrastructure bill? And he basically said no. Now, that certainly raised alarms in my mind, because even just like the president said, there are the lowest interest rates probably in US history right now. And it's an opportunity for us to actually invest in our infrastructure after decades long of basically ignoring it. I think that in order for our economy to get kickstarted, this is the type of investment that we need. I know that I would be supportive of efforts here in the Commonwealth to get these bills done and then some, but I think we are definitely, definitely in a position of having to compromise and work together to find the solutions that we know we can get done immediately. I hope that helps. Appreciate the opportunity to speak, and looking forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative, for joining us. At the end, we will come back together for our Q&A. I do have a couple of questions here that have popped up. So thank you to those folks that are typing in their questions. And with that, Jason, the floor is yours. I know that we talked the other day, and you have both a statewide perspective and a little bit on the national within your presentation. Thanks, Jason.
Can you hear me okay, Tim?
Jason, yeah, we just
Yeah, it was telling me you had the privilege there to unmute me. So I don't know if everyone else will think it's a privilege, but I would just want to thank you for having me join you you all today. And I just want to, I'll start by thanking Chairman Hennessey and Task Force Chairwoman White, who have, as you heard, have done a lot of work when it comes to recognizing the role of infrastructure in our Commonwealth, and of course that role has been so much more magnified in the current times. I just wanted to underscore a little bit of what Representative White had mentioned. A lot of the things that she had mentioned are issues that occurred before this whole COVID-19 situation. And my comments and my role today is to kind of just walk through from our perspective, what those issues are. And I just want to say from the onset, we're not living in a vacuum or not living in a, without any sort of understanding of what, the role of the virus and the pandemic has had on our economy. And we understand that these were very challenging issues for the General Assembly and the governor to deal with, and obviously our current situation today even magnifies or even exponentially increases the challenge of these issues. So I just kind of want to, I have a few slides, and I just put some information on there, and I won't read all this to you for those that are watching, but I just wanted to underscore a couple of the issues. They were already mentioned by the previous speakers in terms of what we see as some of the main impacts, if you will, again, even before the coronavirus hit. And obviously, Representative White talked about the state police and the motor license fund issue. One of the things, we'll get back to that, or I'll get back to that in a second, but there's some current numbers for you, and she had already walked through with you all about the legislation that she has as part of the task force report. And again, we are appreciative of the efforts to walk this back. And why that's important is I just wanted to just kind of remind, maybe this is old or just a repeat of everything, but the reason why the motor license fund and the state police issue is an issue is it's not that the industry does not value or wants to take on the state police. We recognize and value the work that the state police has on the Commonwealth, and they do serve a role in protecting our highways and protecting the citizens of Pennsylvania. And this is not an issue where the construction industry or the transportation industry is taking on the state police, and we don't believe that their level of funding, it is what it is, and the legislators make that decision as part of the budget. But the reason why it's a real issue is because the motor license fund is the Pennsylvania constitutionally created fund that is basically the sole lifeline of how construction projects, particularly highway projects, are funded in the Commonwealth. It is where all the gas tax funding goes, as well as other registration fees, and it is primarily the lifeblood. So when the motor license fund is being used to pay for other things, that is directly impacts our ability to deliver highway projects. And so when you hear terms like it's a diversion issue, or when we use terms of it being a diversion issue, it's not that we're upset that the state police are having that money. It's just really a policy issue of enabling us to put our transportation dollars to work for their intended purpose. And that was really what this issue is about. So when we talk about phasing down, as this legislation would do, and our proposal is to accelerate that. And so we applaud the efforts and support the efforts to do that. But it's really an issue of trying to preserve the precious highway dollars that we have and put them to their intended use. We do not believe that this is, an issue that, the state police should be funded less, for example. So I just wanted to, underscore that. And so, the next issue that obviously impacts the world of transportation is, as Representative White clearly went over, is the impact of the Turnpike debt situation, what we call Act 44, which was the act that allows or directed the Turnpike to make payments to help support our public transit industries, also a key component of making transportation work in Pennsylvania. But a looming crisis, as she had mentioned, exists, and there was an article today, or not today, in the past week, in light of the virus, that had mentioned that the Turnpike is, in this COVID-19 world, in the financial burdens that has created for everyone, that they're not immune to that. Their traveling is down. People using the Turnpike obviously is down, and that's going to impact their ability to make those payments. But this crisis that we talk about exists. It existed before the virus situation, and the crisis is that in 2023, those payments are supposed to be reduced to the tune of $400 million a year. And so the question is, how are the transit agencies going to continue to receive that funding. If it's not coming from the Turnpike, as the Act directs, where will that come from? It'll obviously be a burden on the general fund, and I don't want to be repetitive, but you know, the numbers that the general fund is going to have to deal with is just it's very alarming given with this virus. So that this was a problem before this virus situation, so it still remains a problem that the legislature is going to need to deal with going forward. And the last thing on the next slide there, the last issue that we want to just kind of throw out is that the representative talked about some numbers. We have access to some economists, both with our federal help and other states, particularly North Carolina and Missouri both have projected or seen their own state's fuel tax revenues decrease right now by the tune of about 50%. PennDOT has estimated that they're already thinking that motor license fund that I talked about was going to receive a $300 million hit by the end of this fiscal year, just by the loss of people driving and actually consuming fuel. Our projections, if you use that 50% number and you go back to last year and you look at what the Commonwealth collected for the motor license fund in the months of April, May, and June, and if we assume that those same 50% numbers, and I know we'll see here shortly when the April revenues come in, if that's a good number. But if we just assume roughly the same amount of fuel tax collections that we saw last year, this year, or at least prior to the virus, and you run that math out, we're looking at approximately a $430 million hit by the end of the year. Not necessarily fiscal year in this situation, but we will be able to make a better projection when the Department of Revenue puts out their April numbers at the end of the month here in about another week. We'll see what the impact of this whole entire month of stay-at-home order had on our fuel taxes compared to what they were in a normal April year of say last year or the year before. So that's something that is very concerning. Obviously, it wasn't anticipated. It's no fault of the governor introduced a budget that back in February, but nobody was able to forecast what this virus would do, and so this is obviously going to compound the situation. And obviously, not to add fuel on the fire, but the current federal bill expires at the end of the federal fiscal year, which is September 30th. So Congress is also going to have to figure out how to deal with the federal reauthorization. That issue is very much in flux. The representative, and I won't repeat that, has talked about the president's plan but Congress will likely have to have some sort of an emergency proposal before October 1, or some sort of a continuing resolution, or some sort of a bailout in order just to keep the states at their current level of federal funding. Again, the virus is going to compound that both at the federal level. So moving through some of these slides. The next one just is kind of okay, where are we now? From our perspective, the industry is struggling right now, and I'll talk a little bit about that just briefly. Talked a little bit about the motor license fund impacts, and we're hoping that our estimates are overly high. Hopefully we're not undershooting them, because that's going to make even a difficult situation worse. But now, but I guess as we move on where do we go from here? And the next slide is kind of going to be, obviously it's a fluid situation. Obviously, getting back to Representative Hennessey's, Chairman Hennessey's points, we need to get the industry back to work as soon as possible. And obviously, this is a very fluid situation. The governor made an announcement that as of May 1, all of construction is cleared to go back to business. We're not only saying that the industry needs to go back to work as soon as possible for a self-serving situation, but as the chairman had mentioned, we're going to be in a position to rebuild the economy. And as you can see, an industry that has seasonal layoffs to begin with. Therefore, a lot of our employees are already on the UC system, and this did not make it better as we were looking to come off of winter layoffs and go back to work, which is traditionally what has happened. And now a lot of them are sitting at home waiting to go back to work, waiting to put money in the Commonwealth's coffers through taxes and spending and those sorts of things. And our industry, I would just say, has been working with the department for the past month in terms of developing the appropriate safety protocols to put in place to keep with the CDC guidelines and those sorts of things. And we are ready, willing, and able to do our part in helping put the Pennsylvania economy back into a better situation as we move forward. But we got to get the industry back to work. We got to get our people out there. And maybe we can take advantage of the lower traffic volumes right now and get some projects done faster. A lot of times if the traffic is low, we can work more efficiently and get some projects done and moved and opened up for the general public. Obviously, we want to encourage the legislature to maintain. Representative White talked about the 4% a year reduction in what that motor license fund money is to go to the state police. We believe that is still a responsible thing to do. That this year, that would equate to somewhere around $35 million. So we believe that the legislature should continue that to preserve whatever funds is already in law to direct toward the infrastructure. And I mentioned there about the safety, and we would just say our fourth thing would be is whatever any federal stimulus funds may come down the pike, we would hope that they would go directly into the advancement of infrastructure projects and put into the economy and into that system, as opposed to backfilling and just reimbursing lost revenues. Our thought is that we're going to have those losses. I'm not an expert enough to know what the answers are to all of those issues, but one of the best things we can do is just get the economy humming again, and we will pull out of this together as we move forward. So I kind of went through quickly there. I wanted to leave room for some questions. I will end my comments in saying that, again, we applaud the legislature's work on this task force and Representative White's role in that. We were prepared and still were able to. She and Chairman Hennessey were going to have a series of hearings in late March, early April, to provide industry and stakeholder comments on the bills. We were all lined up to do that, but then, of course, the virus shutdowns and other things occurred that had to disrupt that schedule. And I would just applaud both Chairman Hennessey and Chairwoman White's work on these issues. I don't envy the position they're in, because these were challenging issues before this virus situation. And I'm sure that their job just got even more difficult as we try to figure out how to pull our state out of this. But those are kind of the highlights of where we are, Tim. I can pause here and allow you to use the time for questions